it's not a trivial question. I wish I could tell you that marijuana is in all cases harmless. And when I wrote my book on addiction, which came out in 2008, the research I looked at up to that point on marijuana showed that it did not seem to have long-term negative effects on people, and that there's no such thing as withdrawal from it. Well, research has moved on since then, and it's always controversial, but in 2012, in the United States, the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences published a paper from Britain where they looked at a lot of people over 30, 40 years who began their marijuana use in adolescence, and they showed diminished mental functioning in these people. They showed diminished IQ over the years. They showed diminished neuropsychological functioning, and according to observers' reports, deterioration in their quality of life as well. They did not show the same thing when it came to people who began marijuana use as adults. So there's definitely a question about what is the impact of this substance on the developing brain of the young human being. Now, the same legitimate question also exists about substances that we legally prescribe to kids. For example, in the US, there are 500,000 children right now, at least, who are receiving antipsychotic medications. And they're getting them not to, because they're psychotic, they're not. They're getting them to calm them down, because we don't know how else to, when I say we, I mean as a society, we don't understand human child behavior enough to be able to regulate it, so we just medicate it. But the long-term effects on the developing brain, not good news. And side effects such as diabetes and weight gain and skin changes and so on, we're already documenting them and having to deal with. So marijuana is not the only substance where we have to be careful. As I say, some legally prescribed pharmaceuticals seem to be potentially much worse, actually. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't be careful with marijuana as well. So again, addiction is always rooted in childhood loss and trauma in every single case. And of course, every once in a while, somebody says, well, I had a perfectly happy childhood, but I'm still addicted. And usually it takes me 3 minutes to find that what they thought was a happy childhood is really a question of denial of their own pain. So if you ask a really traumatized person, like if you knew somebody who said that the world is a horrible place, the world is a horrible place, you think he's a traumatized person. He's somebody who'd learned that the world is not safe, and it's dangerous, and he has to fight like a vicious tiger in order to survive. Now this man is running for the presidency of the United States. You're talking about a highly traumatized person. A highly traumatized person. But he thinks he had a happy childhood. His opponent, who was traumatized, not nearly to the same degree, also thinks she had a very happy childhood. Whereas the evidence is quite the contrary. And I think in tomorrow's Global Mail, a Canadian paper, I just read an article about these two. I'm not going to go into it. But they're examples of two traumatized people in denial of their childhood suffering. So that's always at the basis of it. Now, before I take your questions, let me then come to the final use that I mentioned in terms of marijuana, which is again the spiritual use. I mentioned this Chinese emperor who 2,700 years ago wrote about, spoke about marijuana, and there's a quote that I like to, he says about marijuana, this is the Emperor Shen Nung in 2700 BC, he says, if taken over a long term, it makes one communicate with spirits and lightens the body. So some kind of spiritual communion. again, most people using marijuana will not be using it for medical reasons. It doesn't matter what they say. They'll be using it for recreational use. This one study that I mentioned was really about uncontrolled marijuana use in adolescents.
My name is Neil Magnuson. I've been a chronic cannabis user since I was 15.
Yeah.
I don't think I'm brain damaged. I think that, that's right, I wouldn't know.
Yeah, I mean, really, how
But,
would
you
you
know,
know? How would you know?
That's right, how would I know? I could very well be. But, you know, I think that, in my opinion, that's not always true. I'm very skeptical, by the way, of anything coming out of the UK or the United States, and I don't even respect doctors, with all due respect.
Thank you very much.
They've been lying to us for a very long time. I think that there's no non-medical use of cannabis, that I think that even if you're chronically using it as a teenager, I think you're still trying to escape the stress and the emotional separation of trying to be a teenager and grow up.
Fair enough.
I think that there's no non-spiritual use of cannabis, that anytime you're... My question is, do you agree, like with the last question as well, is it not more dose-related with respect to how adolescents would use cannabis and have adverse results or not?
Look, first of all, I would not argue with your personal experience, okay? And with any study, you're looking at statistics and percentages. You're not looking at that every person who does this will have this particular effect. What we're looking at, over a number of people, large number of people over decades, do we see a pattern? And that's what the study showed. Now, if you're not going to trust physicians, don't even ask me a question. What can I tell you? Because I'm a physician, okay? But having said that, and you know what? There are plenty of reasons not to trust physicians. What I mean is plenty of reasons to be skeptical, but not to be cynical, okay? Now, in terms of, again, the problem with adolescence is how can you control and measure the amount of marijuana a kid is using when the substance is illegal and they get it from their buddies in the schoolyard? So there's just no possible way to have information on that.